The Riddle of Flesh and Peace. In the sun-scorched lands of Somalia, where the acacia trees cast long, thin shadows over the ochre earth, there lived a leader unlike any other. His name was Wiil-Waal, a name that whispered through the villages with a mixture of awe and trepidation, for it meant the mad boy. Yet his was not a madness of a broken mind, but rather the eccentric brilliance of a poet and the unpredictable cunning of a warrior. His rule was just, his sword was swift, but it was his mind that was his sharpest weapon. He delighted in testing the intellect of his people, believing that true strength lay not in the arm that wields a spear, but in the mind that understands why it is thrown. One sweltering morning, when the air was so still you could hear the buzz of a single fly, Wiil-Waal summoned the men of his community to the great clearing under the baobab tree. They came from their homes and their fields, their faces etched with curiosity and respect. Wiil-Waal stood before them, his tall frame cloaked in a deep red garment, his hand resting on a polished staff. His voice, when he spoke, was not loud, but it carried a weight that silenced all murmurs. "I have a challenge for you," he began, his eyes sweeping over the crowd. "A test of your perception. I want each of you to go to your herds and bring me a piece of flesh. But it must be a special kind of flesh. It must be a single piece that represents both violence and peace." A wave of confusion rippled through the assembled men. Violence and peace in one piece of meat. They looked at one another, their brows furrowed in thought. Wiil-Waal offered no further explanation, simply turning and striding back to his dwelling, leaving them to grapple with his cryptic command. The men dispersed, their minds racing. All day the village buzzed with debate. One wealthy elder, known for his magnificent cattle, declared, "I shall slaughter my strongest bull and bring its heart. For the heart is filled with the violent passion of a charging beast, yet it is also the source of life, which is peace." Another man, a trader with a large herd of camels, argued, "No, the tongue is the answer. With the tongue, one can declare war and utter curses, which is violence. But with the same tongue, one can broker treaties and speak words of love, which is peace." And so it went, with every man choosing the grandest, most impressive animal he owned, convinced his interpretation was the cleverest. They prepared to slaughter their fattest goats, their strongest sheep, and their most prized camels, each eager to win the favor of their enigmatic leader. However, there was one man named Omar, who was neither wealthy nor a great warrior. He was a humble man with a small family and a modest herd of goats. He returned to his home, his heart heavy with the weight of the riddle. He found his daughter, Fahima, grinding maize outside their small, rounded house. She was a quiet girl, known not for her beauty, but for her watchful eyes that seemed to see the world more clearly than others. "What troubles you, father?" she asked, seeing the deep lines of worry on his face. Omar sighed and sat down heavily. He explained Wiil-Waal's challenge and the grand plans of the other men. "They will all bring meat from their finest animals," he lamented. "How can I compete with them? What flesh speaks of both violence and peace?" Fahima listened patiently, her hands never ceasing their rhythmic work. When he had finished, she looked up, her gaze steady. "Father," she said softly,
The other men are thinking of the animal, but Wiil-Waal is a poet. He thinks of the meaning behind things. The answer is not in the size or strength of the beast. Then what is it, my daughter? Omar asked, leaning in. Go to the herd and find the skinniest, most unremarkable goat we own. You will slaughter it, but you will not bring its heart or its tongue. You will bring Wiil-Waal its throat. Omar stared at her, aghast. The throat of a skinny goat? That is a wretched offering. He will see it as an insult. He will have me punished for my insolence. Trust me, father, Fahima insisted, her voice calm but firm. The throat is the passage for all things. Through it comes the violent cry of anger and also the gentle murmur of peace. It is the channel for the breath of life, but it is also the conduit for the gluttony and greed that cause men to fight. To bring the throat is to bring the very instrument of both conflict and harmony. To bring it from a skinny goat shows you understand that true peace comes not from fatness and excess, but from humility and having just enough. Omar was terrified, but he had long learned that his daughter's quiet wisdom often surpassed his own understanding. With a trembling hand and a doubtful heart, he did as she said. He took the small, sinewy throat and wrapped it in a leaf, his hands shaking as he imagined the scorn of the other men and the wrath of Wiil-Waal.
When he arrived back at the clearing, the air was thick with the smell of fresh meat. The other men stood proudly with their large, bloody offerings, hefty legs of lamb, massive ribs of beef, and thick camel humps. Omar crept to the very back of the line, trying to hide his pitiful contribution. Wiil-Waal emerged and began to inspect the offerings. He walked down the line, his expression unreadable. He looked at the bull's heart and shook his head. "This only speaks of blind strength," he declared. He moved to the camel's tongue. "This speaks only of words, which are empty without action." One by one, he dismissed every offering, leaving the men confused and dejected. Finally, he stood before Omar, who was trembling at the back of the line. "And you," Wiil-Waal boomed, his voice echoing in the sudden silence, "what insult have you brought me? Why do you present this miserable scrap of flesh?" Omar flinched, all courage deserting him. "Sir, great Wiil-Waal, forgive me. This was not my idea," he stammered. "It was the foolish advice of my daughter. I told her you would be angered." A flicker of interest crossed Wiil-Waal's face. He looked from the frightened man to the small offering and back again. "Your daughter?" he said, his voice softening slightly. "Then go and bring her to me. I will hear this foolishness from her own lips." Muttering under his breath, Omar scurried home. "Why did I follow her idea?" he complained to himself. "Now she has brought ruin upon us all." He found Fahima and told her that the leader had summoned her. Without a word of protest, she followed him back to the clearing. When Wiil-Waal saw the calm, intelligent young woman standing before him, he said, "Your father claims you are responsible for this offering. Explain its meaning." Fahima bowed her head respectfully and spoke, her voice clear and steady. "Great leader, you asked for that which represents both violence and peace. The throat is the vessel of both. Through it passes the air that fuels a warrior's battle cry and the soft words that soothe a crying child. It is the path of greed, of a gluttony for food and power that leads to conflict between men. Therefore,
The throat itself is the seat of both our violence and our peace. By severing it, one ends both. I advised my father to bring the throat of a skinny goat to show that wisdom lies not in abundance, but in understanding the dangers of endless desire.
A slow smile spread across Wiil-Waal's face. He looked out at the stunned faces of the village men. "For days you have pondered my riddle," he announced, his voice ringing with authority. "And you all brought me symbols of your wealth and might. But this girl, with no wealth and no might, has brought me a symbol of true understanding. She has seen that human greed is the true cause of violence, and that peace can only be found when that greed is controlled." He turned back to Fahima, his eyes filled with admiration. "You have one of the most brilliant minds in this community. Such wisdom should not be hidden in a quiet home. It should sit beside power." He then looked at Omar and declared, "I will marry your daughter. She is the only one who found the right answer, and her counsel will be a greater prize than all the herds in this land." And so, the humble daughter of a poor goatherd who saw the truth in a simple piece of flesh was wed to the great leader. Her wisdom became his strength, and together they ruled with a justice tempered by a deep understanding of the human heart.